Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. This week, Chris and I are taking a look at the Avatar and the Fire Lord, or as Chris just referred to it, I don't know, the one with the fucking flashback.
Yeah, well, you can't include that because I basically I always say the episode name at the beginning of the recording so I can check the file. And I just outright just said a bunch of client names and we're like, that's not the podcast. So yeah, you won't have heard that.
Which is why I've recapped what you said there because I'm not going to play it, obviously, because you just spilled a bunch of work stuff into the microphone for some reason.
This episode, Dan, I like to think of this episode as podcast roulette, because you've got a handyman turning up potentially in dead on an hour, so we don't know what's going to happen there. And I, sitting in front of me, have a pint of water with a vitamin C tablet in, a giant cup of tea, and an apple juice. I've got sort of all my breakfast drinks that I've not drunk yet. So if we can get through this without pausing for you to open a door or, pausing for me to pee.
It would be more than me pausing to open a door, Chris. I have to record this in the room the guy will be working. So this is going to be a shit show should he turn up at 10 as he suggested.
Roulette.
Yeah.
Right.
We live on the edge. I was like, Chris, I've got a handyman coming on the an hour into the podcast. Can we actually discuss an episode of Avatar under an hour? And Chris went, no, but we'll try anyway.
Yeah, well, I tell you, guys, the amount of times that Dan has said stuff like that, and he's been referring to some sort of weird role play that he's involved in, Anyway,
look, Chris,
it's all.
I thought at this point you'd have some respect for my privacy. Yeah,
I'm sorry, mate.
Telling people about that stuff. Not cool.
I don't think.
I don't tell anybody about all the racism.
Wow, I'm not racist. Just to make that clear. I think in terms of sexual fantasies...
What are you talking about, Chris? You were just telling me before we started. You were just saying, "Oh God, I love racism so much. I'm just so racist." You were just saying it was weird. It's a weird way to state it. I'll be honest with you, but it was,
I am, and I'm aware that this isn't.
I just want the audience to know Chris not engaging with that joke at all. He's like, I'm not
because
even
I've got
going...
no way. Because I've got no what possible benefit is there to me to engaging in a joke where the premise is that I'm racist?
You're right.
Because I could.
You're right. He's
vigorously.
I'll clear it up. He's not racist.
I'm not racist.
He's sexist.
Homophobic as shit, but not racist. No, I'm not homophobic either. I'm just joking.
No. He's also, like I said, he's not racist. He's just sexist. Don't worry about it.
Oh, did you say sexist? So we went for the same joke, but different misogynies.
Yeah. Anyway,
the only group of people I have anything against are people that don't curve when they dip a crisp into dip, that they just sort of stab it in. I'm not going to name names, but over the weekend, Dan, I experienced just someone stabbing a crisp into dip, and it upset me so much. Just quickly, and this isn't helping, by the way. Us keep on track.
I was just about to say we don't sound like two people that are playing podcast roulette. We sound like two people who've got about 8 hours to record.
Let me just finish this point though, because I started it, and people will be wondering where I was going. In terms of sexual fantasies, I think the handyman is a weird one because if someone's coming around to fix something, you're thinking about what they're fixing. You're annoyed that it's broken. You're worried about how much it's going to cost. There's nothing sexy about that scenario.
No, it's frustrating, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. Avatar.
And that's without the added pressure of, I'm supposed to be recording a fucking podcast. I hope he doesn't show up exactly when he said. He was one of those vague ones, from 10, but we don't know when. So he might not show up until 3 o'clock, Chris.
That's my bet, mate. I don't think he's coming until our backup time of recording this, which was 5:15.
That's the thing. That's also possible, I guess. He said from 10. It was one of those really awkward. He implied it was going to be closer to 10 than not, but still. Anyway, let's do Avatar stuff. So this one is The Avatar and the Fire Lord, which is a very, very enticing title for what is a bit of a prick tease of an episode, really, because when you see that title and then you actually sit down to watch it, quite different to what maybe you would expect. In fact, I think last week, Chris, you even said well, I think we're going to see I think it's a bit early, but it sounds like we're going to see some Avatar Firelord action. And I was like, yeah, we are.
Which we did.
Wrong ones.
We did technically.
Yeah. Just the wrong ones. So, with that in mind, I think I've trapped my cat in here with me. I didn't realise that. Look, here he is. Hello. Another reason to be distracted. I thought he was in a different room. It turns out he's in here with me. So yeah, for those who don't remember, this is the episode where we discover the history of Sozin and Roku. Turns out the Fire Lord that started the war and the previous Avatar were actually close friends. And we get their entire sort of backstory about how they each of them rose to power in their own way. Yeah, and a very difficult decision that was made. Well, it didn't seem so difficult for him, for Sozin to get the Fire Lord. For Sozin to get the Avatar Roku out of the way to allow him to enact his plans for essentially world domination. Now, we already knew that Sozin had started it, but this is kind of showing us that. Unlike the episode The Storm, where we get the flashback intercut with some real world stuff, there isn't a lot in the real world, present day, I should say, this week. But there is a brief interaction where Iroh speaks to Zuko for the first time in many weeks, and then we have Aang having hallucinated his way into the spirit world again, being observed by his friends as all this happens. But yes, that's the kind of quick recap of the episode. Chris, what did you think?
First of all, I just want to clarify. So this means that Iroh is his grandfather is Roku.
Zuko. You said Iroh.
Yeah, no, deliberately. So Zuko's got two grandfathers: the Sozin, whatever his name was, and Roku.
Yes, Roku through his mother.
Roku. Right, okay. So Iroh's his uncle through his father, is he?
Correct.
Yeah, he is. Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to work out whether the grandparents
whether Iroh was maybe related to Zuko through the mother's side, not the father's side. No, so Iroh is on the father's side, because if you remember rightly, he would have been next in line to the throne of Fire Lord if he hadn't had the defeat at Ba Sing Se after losing his son, and that's what allowed.
Because he's also shown he's got a lot of good in him. He's shown tendencies towards the spirit world and stuff like that. So I was just trying to make that link, but it didn't seem quite right. And I think it's because I knew that in the back of my head a voice was going, "Well, it's his father's side." Because
but on top of that, I think as well. I think for me personally, it would undercut Iroh. I like that Iroh is good Iroh standing for good in the face of a family that have committed evil. Just helps push the show's message forward of like everyone is capable of good and evil, and that's not just the show's message. That is literally what Aang says at the end of this episode. So I think if they'd made Iroh like on the mother's side, then it's way less anyone's capable of good and evil, but no, just these very specific family lines. Which would be problematic. I think
that would make it Star Wars.
Yeah. So instead, it's kind of. I like that it's mixed up like that. But yeah, absolutely. Zuko is really weirdly positioned, is what this episode essentially teaches us. In that, from his mother's side, she was a granddaughter, down the line from Roku when she married the young prince of the current Fire Lord that was the current that has become our current Fire Lord, and then I've lost the third of that. So that means that like weirdly, Zuko really does quite literally have like the capability of good and bad in him, because he represents the show in that sense, in that his family lines go either way, so he could have that. He has that conflict sort of built into his DNA, basically, which I think is interesting.
I think we'll talk about the flashbacks in a sec. They were brilliant. Like the whole episode's great. Structurally, it is interesting, like you say, because I think And I don't think it's a problem, but I think there's two big structure things that kind of really stuck out to me. One, we go right fucking in. Like, the episode just opening with, like, a dream where Rook is like, by the way, Aang, you got to do this. I was really... I had to check. I was like, have I missed an episode? Like, no, I haven't. Okay.
Yeah, because I honestly, when I put this on, and I was having trouble watching it initially because I was having some computer troubles, but when it finally comes on, I literally thought that Aang, you've got to come see me in a dream was like a part of a flashback, and did I skip an episode?
Yeah,
because
I was really like,
was that part of the previously on? I'm confused.
Well, that's how it literally, and because the scene is so quick as well. I mean, I skipped the recap, but like I was like, is that play? It felt like, I imagine if I watched the recap, it literally would have felt like the end of the recap. It was really weird. So there's that, but you know, what do you take out? Like, you know. And two, it doesn't feel as smooth as Storm that they're both sort of experiencing this. Right. You are sat there going, okay, so Ruko's come to Aang.
That's a good new character.
Sorry.
Ruko. You've combined Zuko and Roku, and I love that you ended up with Ruko.
Roku, that's it. Roku decides to come to Aang at the exact moment that Zuko gets that stuff. And you know, even if you maybe had Roku saying, you know, he's about to discover the truth, so should you. Do you know what I mean? Like, one thing has led to the other. I think that would have been fine. Huh?
Yeah, it's in my notes that it's really clunky. I mean, that is kind of it. Like, because there's a big question relating to this episode that I'll come back to, but I do think the structure plays a factor into what the answer to the question is. I have a big question relating to this episode, but we'll come back to that. But in terms of its structure, I 100% agree with you. It's not very tidy at all. There's so much story to tell that sometimes watching this episode is like watching the previously on for a show I'm about to watch about Roku and Sozin. The framing device is so clunky. Having more time to do the framing device properly would have massively helped that whole rushed feeling. Or not rushed. Rushed is the wrong word. It's just structurally, it's clearly the episode is bursting at the seams. You feel it struggling to get to everything it's getting to. And I do think more time would have maybe helped that. Because if you'd have had more time, you could have done something like The Storm, where you've got a much more natural framing device than this quite quick forced one, and I think that would have given it more time and made it a better episode. But I think the counterpoint to that has got to be, we're in the last season, how many episodes do you actually have to tell your story? You want to get this through, like, can you commit 2 episodes to this? Because that is a big question. Now, not to go into Korra stuff, there's a season of Korra that does literally do a big 2-part episode that ends up exploring something from the past, and I'll tell you right now, it's probably 2 of the single greatest episodes of this entire franchise's history. So there's a part of me that goes, all right, I understand it. They had a restriction. They couldn't spread this out. They did it the best they could. It's a bit clunky, but we get the story, and it's a good story. And I'm glad we get it. The alternative is either doubling it up and losing another episode or not getting it at all. And either of those seem risky. But there's the other part of my brain that goes, yeah, but the double flashback episode from Korra is really, really good. It's like one of the greatest episodes of this whole show.
I don't think the actual flashback, though, I don't think this needs to be 2-part. Honestly, I think these 2 simple fixes would have solved a lot of it.
Oh, really? You think you could have made it? You think you could make it work within the sort of 20-odd minute time frame?
I think it could work better because I don't have any problems with the flashbacks. You know, in terms of the space given to anything. So I think, 1, start with an establishing shot. You know, I know it's not a camera, but a camera pan across the gang all sleeping, go to Aang, and then cut to the dream. Right. Just have an establishing shot of where they are. And 2, the more I think about it, have Roku say, like, it is Roku, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have Roku say, someone else is currently discovering something, a history that you should also know, or something like that. Have the 2 things, you know, one thing has led to the other rather than both coincidentally happening at the same time. Or near enough the same time. I think honestly, you do those two things, and it just feels a bit better. And maybe in order to do the establishing shot, I love it, but maybe you take away the gag of him like getting on the horse and do they have toilets in the spirit world, which does feel a little, I don't know. I don't know. They don't make a lot of toilet gags on the show, so maybe just have them. I would prefer a quick cut back to the gang watching Aang on the dragon thing, but not knowing he's on a dragon. So like Aang riding a dragon that we can't see, and have them sort of raise their eyebrows. You make
right. So you imply the joke without saying the joke literally.
Yeah, and then you use that time to chuck in an establishing shot of them sleeping, just so it's not quite as quick.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, one of the things this episode is missing is, I guess we'll get to the big question, because I think this leads off what you were just talking about, because the reason I say make it 2 episodes is, and I do agree with you, I think both of those things would make this episode function better in terms of the framing device, for sure. But I think my yearning to make it 2 is also to get us more time with Roku and Sozin as people, because I think some of the impact of this episode is slightly lost in that we've got this story of 2 friends that goes so wrong. Like it really, their friendship falls apart in front of us, and the episode does a pretty good job in its 22 minutes of showing us that and establishing the friendship and then degrading it over time. But 2 episodes would really allow the impact of the final choice of Sozin to essentially let Roku die would be much more powerful had we gotten to spend more time with them as youngsters, being friends in the same way that Aang and Sokka and Katara and Toph are all friends. If we'd have gotten to see some of their early adventures in the Fire Nation, just like a couple of minutes, like, just a one quick, like, they were such good friends and they helped this town get out of this, and it was like, a minute or 2 long, like a couple of moments like that sprinkled throughout the episode where we get to see them interacting more, I think would make the ending way more powerful. And again, not to keep harping on it, but that 2-parter in Korra, the one thing it really gets to do for a flashback episode that's relating to characters we've not previously had much time with, it really does make them feel like we've spent many seasons of a TV show with them. And maybe that's these writers evolving and learning as they go. Maybe they thought back to this episode when they were writing that episode of Korra. But for me, I feel like the impact of the ending of this is so good, but it's just missing. You know what? I'm always the character guy, aren't I? I'm always like, make me care about these people so that when things happen to them, I'm way more invested. This is one of those instances where if I cared more about the 2 or their relationship, the ending would be 1,000 times more powerful. That's kind of why I yearn for more.
But I think you can counter that with we know enough. We're not meant to care. I don't think we're meant to care too much about those 2 characters. We're meant to care about the impact it has on Zuko, which, because we know Zuko, we do feel that input. And obviously it's hard for me to counter too much, because you've got that episode of Legend of Korra on your side, which I've not seen. But there's a part of me going, do I want 2 episodes dedicated to 2 characters in the past that aren't gonna, I feel like all the information we needed,
for sure, and
the information we needed for the Zuko side of things is in this episode. And is there the potential that in, the final episode, the final season of this show, if it had been a 2-parter, I can't say for sure that I wouldn't be sat here going, yeah, it's a great 45-minute thing, but did we need it to be 2 episodes? If you think about shows like Ted Lasso season 2, which admittedly it was a character we knew, but kind of did a very much a kind of a side story episode. Mythic Quest, a lot of those shows, when they go, Scrubs did some great ones. A lot of those shows, when they go to someone else for an episode, a lot of those episodes are hugely renowned and fan favourites and stuff. But they're 1 episode. I can't think of an example where someone has gone, okay, right, here's 2 episodes of that, because then it feels like you've slapped a prequel in it. Now, I'm not I'm not planting a flagging that view, but I think there is a counter argument that we get what we need for Zuko.
I 100% agree with you, which is why I said this is going to lead into my big question. So here it is, Chris. The big question. I like this episode. I enjoy it very much. But where does that come from? Am I enjoying this episode as a narrative, or am I enjoying the backstory that's interesting that it provides? Because I'm not sure this episode's story is as satisfying as it could be, for the reasons I mentioned, and I won't repeat from a moment ago. Because my investment in those two characters is reasonably low. You know, I don't want to upset any major fans of this episode, but yeah, it doesn't quite work for me in that sense. But I do still love this episode, and I even forgive the framing device problems because of, one, the impact it'll have on the characters I do care about going forward, as you mentioned. Really good point. But also, I do think this backstory is interesting and fills out the world, because obviously we get to see Roku, traveling the world and being a more traditional Avatar. I said to you several times when this show started, Aang is not on a traditional Avatar journey. It's normally a lot more structured, a lot more organized, certainly a lot less haphazard as this nonsense. So, Aang being a sort of wartime Avatar has had a different journey. This is a great opportunity to see how it should have been. An older person. Notice he wasn't told until he was, 16? Aang, obviously, as a result of the war, was told at the age of, 12, which is insane, or 11 or something. So, I guess, yeah, to count that off, the big question, Chris, do I enjoy the episode as a narrative, or for the interesting backstory it provides? Because I'm not sure the narrative is actually what carries this.
No, I think it's the interesting backstory. I think all of the things I enjoyed about the flashback, and I like you, really enjoyed the episode. I really liked it.
Yeah.
Christ knows if you're watching it in bulk how the beach feels followed up by this. That's hell of a two-parter. But anyway,
season 3 is brilliant and weird. I do love this show for its balls, because it is just absolutely when they commit to an idea, they commit to an idea. Like they don't. To their credit, with the exception of the fact that I think this could have easily been 2 episodes personally, but with the exception of that notion, fuck me, did they just go for it, right? We're like, no, we're doing a flashback episode. We're doing a flashback episode.
Yeah, we're doing a flashback episode. Where should it go? Let's follow up the Breakfast Club remake or whatever it was, whatever that film was with this. A lot of the things I love about it.
Forget about me. Sorry.
A lot of the things I love about it.
That's how they should have ended this episode too.
You what? Sorry.
That's how they should have ended this episode too. It's like Aang and Zuko, like Aang remembering Roku, Zuko reading the scrolls about Sozin, and it's just like weird cheesy cuts where they're faded into the background. It's going, "Don't you forget about me."
Dan has spent a lot of recent episodes requesting fan arts and video edits, and I want someone to make it.
I mean, holy hell! If someone does that and slaps that on this episode and does some fades, oh, you're my hero.
I tell you what, Dan, and we don't have the time for filler, but those that remember last episode, we talked about fan art, and Dan was like, "Oh, I don't want to search their names in fan art because who knows what we'll find."
Well, no, I didn't want to search anything to do with swimwear and those characters because I knew fan art would be amongst it, and I was curious to see what if the original designs were out there, but not that curious, not willing enough to put some of the images that would likely put in my internet and browser cache, even if I didn't click on them.
Let me tell you, Dan, I was like, I don't think that would definitely happen, so I did search it.
Oh no,
and you were right.
No, Chris.
It was bad. I was like, oh god.
Because Chris took a bullet for me, doodaloo. Fucking hell. No, guy. Oh my god, you're a madman. Well, so you took the bullet. Are the original designs out there, and are they that bad?
Mate, designs are out there. I don't think the original designs are out there. No, but people have certainly given it a damn good go as to what those original designs could have been.
The question we had was this Nickelodeon being a bit oversensitive? Or did they genuinely draw something that shouldn't have been on children's television? And that was just an idle question that led to a running joke last week. That obviously you don't want to Google that because you don't want to put any of these characters' names into Google with anything related to swimwear written in it, because it's just going to lead to some horrendous fan art. Not horrendous in the sense of I don't want to see the things that people are drawing. But Chris took that.
Oh yeah, you can't.
How
deny,
bad was it? Like that's
you can't deny that. You can't deny the talent of the artists. You know.
Yeah, that's what I didn't want to put down, because I've seen fan art of other things before, and I mean legitimate. Like I don't know, not to delegitimize, but like just standard fan art of things. Like I've drawn the characters in this thing. There's some amazing artists out there learning that way by drawing their favorite animated things.
Have you seen the clip from the John Bishop show at the weekend?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. I've never watched the John Bishop show in my entire life, Chris, but that clip found its way to me through Twitter, and boy, howdy did it. For those who don't know, I won't give you too much context, but John Bishop was in Doctor Who this year, and on his separate show, he went into the strangeness of being on a show that's that sort of popular in nerd culture, and what that led to in terms of some fan art of himself, and it's kind of amazing. If you find that clip, it's very good.
It's very clever because he's done a show called The John Bishop Show for BBC like 4 years ago, but this was actually the first episode of his chat show, which wasn't brilliant, but very clever to put something that would then spread through Twitter and social media and promote the show, because it was trending, and I was like, oh, this is going to be, bless him, this is just going to be full of people, not to sound patronising, but this is just going to be full of people going, well, that wasn't as good as Graham Norton. And I looked at the trend and it was all about that, and I was like, oh, clever move. Yeah, I don't know that. Look, because the drawings I was seeing were not what would have aired, but I think they did demonstrate, as we talked about last week, that yes, bikini, if it was like bikini bottoms, not the skirt things, yeah, I think it would have been a bit weird and inappropriate. But yeah, I mean, what Google image was showing me is not what would have ended up on television. So.
Jesus Christ. I kind of love and kind of hate that that's now come up on 2 episodes, though, but hilarious.
I was going to tell you about it off air because I didn't want to look weird, but I literally just was like, I don't think if you Google them and swim... Oh, my God! Like...
Okay, so my
anyway.
You know, I'm retracting the request to listeners, because I said last week, if anyone knows if that artwork is out there and can like safely link to, just, you know, if there, because again, I am just purely from a trivia perspective, I was interested to know who was at fault, whether Nickelodeon was being overcautious or whether the creators was. But I'm retracting all of that. I don't want anything now. I don't want to know.
I nearly sent you some, but then it would be in my screenshots or WhatsApp history. I was like, can't do this.
No.
Anyway, so
I don't want to know anymore. I'm just going to assume it was a combination of both. Maybe they were a little bit too raunchy, and maybe Nickelodeon was a bit extra, you know, coming down on them for it. But I don't want to. I don't want the answers anymore. Don't.
So everything, going back to this because I'm conscious of podcast roulette. Everything I like about the flashbacks, or not everything I like, the things I enjoy the most are exactly what you say. It's playing off of what we already know.
Yeah.
So for example, you sit there and you go, oh fucking hell, how nice would it have been for Aang to have a leisurely scroll around the 4 kingdoms as he learned the 4 elements, like, and that shot where, you know, we see him using all 4 elements at once is just brilliant and epic. But the reason it feels epic is because, you know, we really understand what that means. Watching him watching the difference between his training and Aang's training was really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the volcano stuff was all brilliant. And like just seeing that real sort of, I don't think we've seen power like that before, and that really unique idea of someone, you know, fighting a volcano. and the
Yes.
idea of it being the notion of like as power as much awesome power as the people that control these elements have, the elements on their own also have a shitload of power. But I don't mean it as and I don't think you did either, I don't mean it as a criticism that those things work because of what we already know. Because fundamentally, this is a flashback episode of a show that's been on for 3 years. That's by design. Like that's I don't think that is in any way a criticism. Because, the showmakers hearing it would just go, well, yeah, that's the point. The flashback episode in Friends works because of the jokes that land because you know what comes after.
Right.
So I'm not sure how much a flashback episode of a show in this context, a flashback episode to sort of, add context to characters and events. I don't know how much it should be judged on its independent narrative. Could I have shown this episode to Jess and she enjoyed it and it made sense to her? Probably not. But I can name you 20 flashback episodes that logic applies to. You know what I mean? Like something like the Mythic Quest one isn't a flashback episode. Whilst those events take place in the past, it's way more of a side story in the vein of the Ted Lasso one than it is a flashback episode in the vein of, what Friends did, for example.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because you're sort of like, I guess my question is like, does this episode work on its own as a narrative? And I don't mean on its own in the sense of, that whole thing you said about like, Friends episode that's the flashback one that's playing on what we already know. That's fine. All that stuff's fine. I'm not criticizing that episode. I'm just saying, storytelling, basic storytelling. When we review this podcast, we say, "Oh, the story didn't work for me. I wasn't invested in that character, that situation, or whatever." I'm saying purely from narratively, just as an episode, like forgetting the context of the sense that it's literally a flashback episode. I'm just not sure the story functions as well as it could. And that's kind of I guess that's where I've landed. Like this is only on this viewing, by the way. This is an episode that I have watched many, many times and had literally no qualms about. Just like, yeah, that was brilliant. It's a little bit clunky in terms of the framing device. I think that's always occurred to me that's a bit out of nowhere. But in terms of, I guess, like critiquing the episode, analyzing the episode, like the one thing that just I cannot get my head around is actually, strictly speaking, I don't think the story of this episode holds the weight it should. But as you've sort of said, like for you know, I guess in the big question I had, do I enjoy the episode as narrative, or is it just the interesting backstory, or just for the interesting backstory it provides? I guess you've already kind of clarified. For you, the interesting backstory is kind of enough to make up for the fact that maybe narratively or in terms of character exploration, it's a bit thinner. For you, that I guess that's where you've landed. I'm still kind of on the fence a little bit, because the first time this thought has kind of occurred to me, and I haven't really decided where I've landed on it, because you know what I'm like. I'm all about the character.
I do think that, but I also I don't think it's overly, and this could just be a personal thing. I don't think it's overly that thin either. Like, we get a lot of time seeing their relationship being playful and strong. We get time seeing, I suppose maybe we don't, we only get one scene of conflict, but that fight's epic. We get the heroic moment when they return to do the volcano. I guess it does move at a pace, and it is a little bit like it's a bold move to have a character do the right thing and then immediately the wrong thing in the space of a couple of minutes in the same scene. Right. So yeah, I guess maybe it is a bit thin. What are your big issues? Why is it thin for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that sort of thing. Like, having a character say, "Oh, I feel this way. Now I feel this way," because we're jumping through time so fast without getting to spend any time in each moment to really confirm with their actions and choices how they're actually feeling. Instead, we just have to rely on what they're telling us they think in each moment, because we don't ever get to actually show any of their thoughts and feelings. The only time we get to demonstrate what they're thinking and feeling, it's right at the end, and at that point, my investment is low. When Sozin makes the choice he makes to leave Roku, to essentially to die and not help him, that's a great moment. He's making a choice. But that moment's choice would be so much more powerful if I'd understood better all of the choices that come before it and had more time to explore those. If I'd have seen him demonstrate, because for all I know, having seen this episode, as a character, Sozin was always secretly evil and just kind of lightly pretending to be his friend. The only reason I know that's not the case is because the episode directly told me in words like, "Oh no, we were the greatest of friends," But it would have been nice to be shown all that stuff, basically. And I think the only way you fit that in is if you make it longer. And then, as we've established, that was a rock and a hard place for them as well, because they're in the last season. They've only got a number of episodes ordered. Although I'm sure this show was so successful at the time, I'm sure if they'd have reached out to Nickelodeon and said, "Can we have an extra?" they would have done. But I guess,
Yeah, because there's the character stuff you've just described, and actually think about it, there's the plot stuff as well. Like we know, and I don't want to harp on too much on if you were watching it blind, because I don't think it's written for that. But we know that by "I want to unite the nations," he means take them over. But if you're watching it, let's explore that a bit more, because he presents the plan as uniting the nations, and then when we see the plan being executed, it's very clearly just, taking over the Fire Nation, taking over everything. And it's like, well, what's the leap between those two things? And, I suppose if it was 2 episodes, you could maybe have Roku consider it and then be like, wait, this isn't what we talked about. Like, how much more powerful if that fight is not you're doing the bad thing, I'm representing good, but if that fight was more sort of personal and intimate, so it was more what you described was uniting. You told me that's what you wanted to do, but actually what you wanted to do is take over, and those are 2 very different things. But we don't have the time for that,
right?
And we understand it because we know what the Fire Nation go on to do. But having the time to explore that personal conflict, as opposed to it literally, a lot of this, even the Zuko of it all, comes down to good versus bad.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's kind of where I'm landing. It's like you're right. Even storyline wise, it's like there are elements that I think because they rely a little bit on real world understanding. Over the years, many different countries have, in history have spread and have invaded neighboring countries under the guise of, well, we're having a lot of prosperity and wealth. Let's invade and spread our success. That isn't a completely new idea to the show, like to the world. Like that's happened a lot in history. So when he says that, I do think that if you have a bit of historical context, you can figure it out again. But again, it's about that. That's bringing your own knowledge to it instead of what the episode actually gets to do. One thing they do that's clever is I do think taking advantage of a trope. There's the old, "You dirty rascal, what you doing back here? Come over here!" And then they're actually friends, When he first comes back and he's like, "You address me as Fire Lord now." "Oh, yeah, I'm only kidding." And, they hug or whatever. But then he comes back years later and it's actually, "You need to address me as Fire Lord now." That is a shorthand and quick and reasonably clever way to show you how their relationship has evolved. But, exactly that. It's quick shorthand to doing it. Like this whole episode is, and I do feel bad because I feel like we've spent a lot of time sort of pulling apart a really good episode of this show. But I guess that's kind of like the whole overanalyzing the show is our bag. And we could have sit here and gone, "I really liked the bit when this happened. I really liked the bit when this happened." But I think it's much more interesting to have a look at maybe the ways in which it didn't work. But I do think that's, for me, stops this episode from being great and just leaves it as like, that was good. I got information that I really liked having that has implications going forward. If it's okay with you, I think we should maybe move on from that then, unless you have anything to add to the point I just made.
No, not at all.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about some of the specifics of the things that worked there. So I do love the visuals. I think the fight between the 2 of them, plus the sequence with the volcano at the end, is staggeringly well animated. I liked the way they subtly grew the 2 characters up over time. Thought that was very well drawn. I think the music is at some of its most epic in this episode. The moment when Roku is a fully realized avatar and you've got the rising strings, which are just the standard strings of the show, combined with those visuals. Whew. Oh boy, that's something. Obviously, it's very rushed through. Another thing I wish we'd had more time with, but the love story element of it. The idea of, Roku went through something similar to Aang, in that, there was a girl that didn't notice him. Although, there's a really weirdly superficial message at the end of that, because it has got that moment of being the Avatar doesn't hurt your chances with the ladies, which is insane that Roku says that in this episode.
Yeah, that is another one where it felt like a really funny joke, but you also I was sat there wanting to find out more about their partners. Because part of the tragedy of the end is, his wife is escaping, and we don't really know what happened to all those people. A lot of fire was going everywhere. Did they all still die, as well as him? Who knows?
Yeah, she escaped with their kids, I assume.
Yeah, but then we see them all on a boat. But then, like I say, the fire. That fire's going everywhere. It wouldn't shock me to know the fire that those people ended up dying from the fumes or whatever as well.
I guess we know they survived because obviously she got away with the kids, one of which is Zuko's mother. So we.
Oh yeah, good point.
I guess we if you do the math, I guess you can figure it out. It's not. You're right though. In the moment, it's not very clear whether those people got out of it or not. Again, this is what I'm saying. This whole episode, just to make it a really good story of its own, it really does need to be two, I think. But literally after I said we were going to move on from that point. Yeah. So I do think what this does for the characters going forward is really, really important, though. As someone who's experiencing the show for the first time, how are you feeling about that now? What do you what do you think the implications of this are for Aang and Zuko going forward?
Without sounding so, for Aang, he just he knows the story. Do you know what I mean? There didn't seem to be too much of I can't remember what the reasoning Roku gave for Aang needing to know, but I think it's
Roku doesn't. Aang in the end determines his own meaning from it, and he says that it's about learning that there's both good and evil in everyone, and that there's that not everyone is cleanly villainous or cleanly good. There's always conflict, and people can be reached.
What it means moving forward is just more weight to the stuff we already know. Zuko's already feeling that conflict, right. And it just kind of puts a name to that conflict. He discussed that on the beach. And Aang, maybe logically it would indicate that Aang's going to try and reach out to Zuko a bit more, because he understands that those what you just said about the lines between people and stuff. So yeah, I guess it just gives Aang more impetus to reach out, and it gives Zuko more impetus to maybe give in to him wanting to reach out.
And do you think, in terms of the, I don't know how to phrase this for that, or making you overthink it and think that I'm trying to spoil something. So I found this episode, even on my first viewing, quite interesting in that we have Roku, the previously presented good former Avatar, essentially saying to Sozin, pack it in or I will murder you. He doesn't say it in those words, but I will end you is basically the alternative to backing off with his invasion plans. I found that to be quite an interesting and powerful point, because Aang is a character I'm, not convinced is willing to commit a murder, right? So
no,
I found this episode a little bit intriguing for the possibilities for Aang, in that I go, well, I don't actually know. In the same way that in Steven Universe we set up a character that would be not capable of winning by brute force, or not capable of winning by brute force, not willing to win through brute force. But you've got a character like Ozai, the Fire Lord, who is absolutely going to be uncompromising. How do you get Aang into that and out of that situation? And that was already on my mind. And then you've got the previous Avatar being quite flippant and very different to Aang, I think, in his approach of just like, hey, stop invading shit or I'll kill you. Avatar, remember?
But
But
maybe it's the same parallel. Like, it's about Aang doesn't win by brute force. Aang wins by talking to people and encouraging them. I'm assuming now, season finale, Aang's there, Zuko's there. Aang pulls out a ukulele. I don't need you to respect me. I respect me. I don't need you to love me. I love me. But I want you to know if you could know me. If you could change your mind. And
then Fire Lord Ozai is just like, you're right. That's so catchy. I will stop being a despot immediately.
Just to make it clear for anyone that's not listened to Steven University but does get that joke, that's one of my favourite songs from the show. I'm not disrespecting that moment.
No, it's an incredible thing. So it's just that one thing I took away from this episode in terms of how it might affect them going forward wasn't just the ways in which they spoke about it at the end, where Zuko finally understands why he's so conflicted. Aang has a message reinforced to him that, and it's been the message of the whole show, really, that not everyone in the Fire Nation is inherently evil. There's good and bad in everyone. I feel I'm saying it in that tone, not because I'm fed up with the show doing it, but because I'm fed up of repeating it on this podcast. But the show does such a good job making that its theme over its 3 seasons that I feel like I've said it 1,000 times. But then from, moving on from those two things, I definitely enjoyed getting both those messages across, but I definitely picked up on that on my both first watching and really strongly on this one. This idea of actually, what will the solution be going forward? Will Aang have to essentially follow through on Roku's threats? Because that's the other thing is Roku's excuse for showing Aang all this is like, you need to understand my mistakes. You need to understand the things I did that got us here. This is because he says at the beginning of the season, Roku said to Aang in a weird little dream thing, you're cleaning up the mess I made. I don't know if you remember that little hint to this episode from the previous one, but yeah.
Yeah, and if I just think it has to end because also so many amazing shows like Steven Universe and stuff manage to find other ways of doing this. But what you will often see in stuff that's got a family audience or certainly a young child audience, very rarely can they have the hero kill. So what you find is there's kind of 2 ways of getting around that. Either they inspire other people or someone else to do the killing, or the person accidentally kills themselves, a la Spider-Man. Spider-Man, the first Tobey Maguire film's got 2 great examples of that. Green Goblin impales himself on his own device, and the guy that Spider-Man wants to kill, and kind of does because he forces them in the position, technically accidentally trips over something and kills themselves. So you at no point, no child is coming away going, my hero is a killer. And I think with this, what this feels like it's building towards to me is the first one, not the latter accidental one, but the Zuko, other members of the Fire Nation rallying against the Fire Lord.
Chris, our roulette has not paid off.
Is the guy here?
15 minutes early. So what I'm going to say, if that's okay, and I'm really sorry to do this, is it okay, Chris, if we record the trivia at the end of this at a slightly later date?
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We will... Dan agrees with that point. It was very eloquent and great.
It was that's what's really a bummer. Is that was a really good point. I'm really bummed that we've had to just completely interrupt the flow of that. I'm so sorry.
We will after the beep. We're going to come back for Triv and wrapping up.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for being patient with me on that one. We're back. Hello, everyone.
We're back. Podcast roulette. Yeah,
We
we're
lost.
back.
We lost podcast roulette. The guy, for listeners, because Chris already knows this because I text Chris, but the guy came in. He was here 10 minutes early, and we only had like 10, 15 minutes left, really, of stuff to do on this podcast. And I said, yeah, we're sorry about to end the podcast earlier. I was like, it was funny the situation because Nadia, while you were making your last point, Nadia was keeping him at bay outside, and I was like, oh, he's here, and I was like realizing what was happening. And so I mentioned it to him because we're trying to explain why it was we just held him outside for a couple of minutes. He was like, oh, well, it is 10. And I'm like, no, it's not. And he like glanced at his watch, just like, oh yeah, I'm like 10, 15 minutes early. And I guess Chris made this point. He must have been baffled at people being annoyed at him for being early, but we'd planned stuff. I thought I had 10 minutes left.
I assume you were a lot more angry in your messages to me than you were displaying to him. But I was like, this poor bloke will have never experienced anger at being, 10 minutes before the arrival time is actually great. Like,
yeah, but here's the thing. It was particularly frustrating for me because I finished work really late last night. I didn't get home until like 1 a.m. My alarm goes off at like 7 this morning, 7:30, to try and get me up to watch the episode and do the notes before we started recording. I'd sacrificed my own well-being to do this. So the fact that I didn't even get to do it and that it was interrupted, and the whole point of me getting up early was to stop that from happening. Because what's annoying, Chris, is if we'd have stuck with our original recording time, we'd have been fine. Because the original recording time was 12, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we only moved it forward because of all that.
To avoid him. So I moved it forward, sacrificed my sleep, and it still got fucking interrupted. And we didn't even need to do it. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's all sorted now. Handyman's been and gone. I will say, we live in a world where no one really has their phone on noises anymore, but I did get a selection from his phone as it went off. One person called him. It made a wolf howl, a really long noise for a good few seconds, and it came, incredible. Then another person called and it was like a funky little like jingle disco song, and I remember thinking, question one is why would anyone have their phone not on silent these days? That's what vibrate is for. But two, even if you're gonna do that, like fucking hell, like who are all these people that have got such distinct ringtones?
And has he done it with everyone? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I know.
Because I was hoping, because you told me about the wolf, and my reaction was, is it a wolf for everyone or is it personalised? And then you were like, bingo, someone else has got a funky disco one.
Yep.
But when my hope was it was personalised, but it was all animal sounds.
yeah. So the first guy's a wolf, the second guy it's like a lion roaring.
Yeah. Yeah. Next one is like and then
it's like a dolphin doing that weird little chatter. Yeah, he didn't get enough calls for me to identify how bespoke they were. And I'll be honest with you, Chris, we didn't start on the best terms, so I couldn't really ask. But anyway,
did it get fixed? Whatever he was fixing,
it did. It was more complicated than. That's another thing. I told him 4 times, 5 times. I don't know how many times. I told him enough times. It's the electric. It's not the boiler, it's the electric. Don't replace the clock thing on the boiler, because that's not broken. There's a problem with the power. I know there's a problem with the power. You can see it happening. When you flick the fuse, the other one goes off. It's something to do with the power. I don't know what it is, because I'm a dummy, but it's definitely to do with that. They sent a guy around to try and replace the clock thing on the boiler. And he did that, and then it still didn't work, because guess what, Chris?
It was the power?
It was the power! The thing I told them from the beginning. So then, luckily, the guy they'd sent to replace the clock boiler wasn't a boiler specialist, but was actually a spark that just knew how to install those boiler panels. So he just went out, got his electrician kit out, and fixed the electric problem instead.
Yeah, but you got lucky there that he was an electrician.
We got very lucky. But I was telling him from the beginning. I know I'm an idiot, but maybe sometimes listen. Just every now and then.
Anyway, so what are your... Yeah, so obviously I was talking...
Yes.
I don't know. You've just listened to it.
So we were talking about like where this goes from here and the position they're going to put Aang in a world where Philo Dozai isn't likely to give up his power easily, but we're also setting up this possibility that Aang isn't really going to be necessarily the murdering type as a peaceful monk, and you talked about you were talking about very eloquent. It was a very good point. You were talking about the ways that other shows and movies have gotten around this. Your key example was the Spider-Man example, where in multiple times the villains killed themselves. But you've also talked about examples where the heroes have had other people around them to do it to avoid them having to do the act, as it were. There are definitely lots of different ways around it. Steven Universe found the third option, which is to sort of like, convince the bad guy not to be the bad guy. But the only problem with that in this scenario, I guess, is that, they've done a lot to set up Ozai as being pretty unreasonable. I don't know how much work you would have to do to get away with a Steven Universe ending. More work than Steven Universe, I imagine.
Oh yeah, you would believe it with Zuko, but you wouldn't believe it with Fire Lord.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting point, and it's just something to be thinking about. I think because it's something this episode brought up in me by having that sequence where Roku was forced to threaten that kind of action. The or else bit, it definitely brought that sort of thought up. So I do think this episode informs the characters in more ways than just the sort of the more obvious ones that it expresses right at the end. My final question for you on the episode itself, then, before we get onto like trivia stuff, Chris, is: do you think this episode is necessary? Because we talked last week about how we had this jaunt to the beach, How much did we get out of it that we didn't already know, particularly when it comes to like Zuko and Azula? We might have gotten some more information about, May and Ty Lee, but did we learn anything particularly new about our leads, our main villains? So
we didn't learn anything new. We didn't learn anything new, but for me, we got enough texture to Zuko's character, to what went down before, to Ruku. We got enough texture. And enough detail that for me it is relevant. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say so too. I think the world building, especially. I mean, if you didn't do this episode, you'd cut Roku's line from earlier in the season anyway. But they have Roku say earlier in the season, you're solving problems that I basically created during my time as the Avatar, and getting more context for that now is really important, I think. And also understanding a little bit better how it started. Why did a war start around the time Aang was born?
Yeah, completely. I also want to add, not on that, but on the episode in general, that volcano sequence is brilliant. The animation, the notion of it, like to do something so fresh and visually interesting is such a feat. Like, little side moan, I get it. I'm getting a little fed up with people leveling sky beams and faceless armies as criticisms against superhero films. I know we've seen it too much, but there's not that many different things you can do. And we've had sort of, the one-on-one Civil War style combat being the end. We've had a lot of that kind of stuff now as well. Like, come on, people. There's not if they didn't do anything, if a superhero and a villain sat down at the end of a comic book movie and just had a chat, nobody would be going, you know what? That was awesome. That's what I came to this looking for. But yeah, that's just me making a side note. But the reason it made me think of it is because this is a visual I never would have predicted. We haven't seen before in Avatar. And like I said earlier, just the notion of like the actual power of the elements themselves, I thought that was just so effective. And it was just so desperate as well. And to convincingly make us believe that an Avatar that we've just watched train and become so incredibly powerful. And obviously, Aang's always been sort of hindered slightly. And we've seen him in the Avatar state. We've seen him kick ass. We've seen him do a lot of brilliant things. But because he's been hindered by time frames and masters he's had access to, this is potentially, the first time we've seen in non-Avatar form the full strength of an Avatar. Especially that shot where they move all four elements at once. The visuals of a lot of those flashbacks as well just giving the audience what they want to see, I thought was stunning as well.
Yeah.
Even just for that, I think the episode is worth it because
giving
that
us a
volcano
glimpse-
sequence was so powerful.
Giving us a glimpse of what Aang could be, that is like a really seeing what a fully fledged Avatar should look like. Like it's like giving you a glimpse at the goal. They've been running this race, but we've never seen the finish line. As an audience, you can imagine what the finish line might look like, for sure, but we've never had it. And that you're right. That is actually in itself reasonably noteworthy. Like, yeah, that's. That in itself sort of justifies the episode's existence to give the audience an idea of what a fully trained Avatar could be, because then it sort of shows you how far Aang has yet to come. Like, he is he's not near the end of his journey at all. There's so much for him to learn, which just makes him seem like even more of an underdog. So it actually, I think, does also help with the general, with the overall conflict of the show.
And obviously the themes of friendships for their group, not just Aang and Zuko, but the gang and the idea of friendships going on past lifetimes. I mean, a little bit of me when at the end where they hold hands and talk about how can friendships last more than one lifetime. I'm like, you cheeky bastards, setting up Korra already, are you? I see what you're doing, you scamps. But yeah, I thought the whole thing was really, really great. And it's always one of those things when we praise the animation, because, there's only so many different ways you can go, fucking hell, the animation in that bit was really great. But the animation in all of the flashbacks, from the training montage to the volcano sequence, was great. Like, it was really, really brilliant.
100% agree. It's been really powerfully done, I think, and it's really cleverly done as well. I think this show has always been, and all the Avatar related shows have always been very good about where and when they spend their budget.
Yes.
Like, this is a time to do a really beautiful animation. This is a little scene where they're going to be talking, and it's like jokey. It doesn't really need them. They're very wise about how they spend their money, because they not to get too much ahead, but I'll tease this now. The finale is visually spectacular in so many ways, and there is a sense of some of the episodes were like they were to save money so they could do this, this epic visual, and it's a very good show for that. I think from a producing side, the creators of the show are both very talented writers and storytellers, world builders, but they're also actually very apt as producers, and that's quite rare, to be honest with you. A lot of the best creative people not necessarily suited to actually be, running a production. We see that a lot in the UK, where like writers who have just always been writers find themselves at the helm of a TV show. And suddenly, the production-wise, it's like, I don't know how to organize this at all, and that's not uncommon. So yeah, they're very talented people that work on this show. So, with all that in mind, are we moving on to the triv, Chris?
Yeah, man, let's triv it up.
I'm not going to do the thing that I say. I'm going to save it.
No, go on, do it.
I'm gonna give you some trivia.
Thanks, man.
I feel like that was the Bart Simpson thing, that I didn't do it thing, where they're all like, "Say the line, Bart." I didn't do it.
Yay! Look, we've only got so many episodes left. I'd like to commit to that.
No, it's fair. That's fair. I did think of something while you were talking as well. That I was like, oh, we should have talked about that. Oh yeah, the Monk Gyatso thing. By the way, yeah, we didn't talk about that, but very quickly, I loved that Avatar Roku had trained with Monk Gyatso, but as a child, and then obviously Aang, trained under Gyatso. That's lovely. I like that. It's nice.
Yeah, very nice.
So, trivia-wise, while in the spirit world, Aang was bald and wearing his original Airbender clothes again. I guess it's a little bit like the Matrix. When you're in the spirit world, you match your residual internal self-image. Just a little animation detail, quite nice. In the visions of Roku's training, they're an example of sort of a more standard Avatar training. custom and sort of methodology. It seems that while training in each of the other elements, avatars, generally speaking, would wear the standard clothing of that nation, but return to their own once they have mastered all 4 elements. Because we got to see Roku both in airbender robes, the Earth Kingdom sort of like, I don't know, shorts, I guess you'd call it. They don't wear a lot in the Earth Kingdom. It's hotter there, I understand, but yeah, it's it's an outfit that wouldn't do them very well with the water tribes, to tell you that. Yeah, so we get to see them in all the different outfits basically. So there you go.
Which is great.
Pretty cool. During Roku's wedding, there are guests in blue and green clothing that can be seen, representing the sort of openness at the time of the 4 nations prior to the war. It's a nice little detail that I enjoyed. Presumably friends he made along his travels. Fire Nation colony that Roku and Fang see when Roku's on his dragon and traveling around, sees the Fire Nation colony in that Earth Kingdom location. It has a sort of Ba Sing Se-esque wall of its own, maybe not as big, but yeah, it seems that the Earth Kingdom have used their ability to bend Earth to create these big giant walls, not just in Ba Sing Se, but in many other locations as well. Obviously most effectively used at Ba Sing Se, I assume, because of its just sheer size.
Yeah, but a good detail to represent that's kind of, a cultural thing that the Earth Kingdom did.
Right, yeah, like that's their like sort of strategic, like that's their approach, is like walls and defense. Yeah, that's good. Although, funnily enough, Toph is very much about offense, which is so it is interesting to see. The stance and motion that Fire Lord Sozin uses to sink and redirect the volcano's heat energy mirrors the form that Iroh teaches Zuko when he's teaching him how to channel energy from lightning. So it seems that it's not just Iroh that learned from other cultures. It seems maybe Sozin had observed waterbenders also, which is interesting. The Eastern Air Temple is seen burning. The reason the sky seems orange in that shot is not actually because of the fire, but because that is during the comet. That's when the Fire Nation obviously made their first. The reason that comet is now called Sozin's Comet is because it was that Fire Lord that realized that he could use it to his advantage and push forward in his march into the various different nations. And obviously they took out the air nomads first because of their fear of Aang. But yeah, the reason the sky's orange is not because of the fire or a stylistic choice. It's actually because that's during the comet. Let's have a look. Oh, this is the... Nice. So this is an interesting one. So this is the first chapter in this book, Book 3 Fire, where Iroh has spoken. Now, I've said in previous episodes, presumably this was them scrambling to replace him, because obviously the actor in question passed away, having recorded most of his lines for the previous season, and they had someone come in to just sort of, touch up a couple of random lines here and there. But I guess that you kind of go, if you already have an actor in place, why would you do that? Have him not speak for several episodes. So yeah, apparently his long period without dialogue is, several people think it's related to the actor. But on the DVD commentary, apparently the creators have said that they actually had always planned to have Iroh spend the first few episodes this season completely silent. And that just lined up conveniently. I'm wondering if it would have stretched as far as episode 6 in the original plan. Unsure. Yeah, unsure. I'll be honest with you, it's such incredible timing, it's hard to believe it's an accident. But yeah, also, I don't see why they would lie about that.
No, it's true. Yeah.
So there's a part of me that goes, come on, guys. That's why you had him silent for a bit, while the other guy, I don't know, perfected his impression or whatever. I don't know. Did you notice
hired and that stuff?
Did you notice the voice was any different?
No, I didn't actually. I mean, I wasn't looking out for it, but no, I didn't notice, which is good news.
Yeah. Did you find it a bit weird, actually? I did when you asked you about this, that Iroh suddenly is speaking to Zuko.
No, did he not? But he didn't. But in my head, I thought he sort of barked at him or the guard in the episode where he got all muscly, but maybe that didn't happen.
No, he's not. This is the first words that character has spoken all season. And when Zuko came in to
'cause
talk
it
to
was
him, he
such a-
literally turned his back on Zuko in a previous episode.
Yeah, I remember that. But it's such a no. It didn't. It didn't jar because it's a bit. Also, I mean, I'm just taking in what he's saying. Do you know what I mean? What he's saying is so big that one, I think if you were to see it on paper, he's not going to talk until he reveals this. You'd go, oh, well, that makes sense. But two, when you hear it, you're not going, hey, he's speaking. You're going, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I think from a character perspective, it's like if he had something to pass on to Zuko, why be in a mood with him at first? Why not tell him this weeks ago when he came to speak to you the first time?
Yeah, but it's very Iroh to want him to. He didn't tell him this time. He made him. He engineered.
He engineered him going to find it. Yeah. Which, by the way,
which is very Iroh.
How do you do that? He did it. Yeah, it's very Iroh, but he's locked up. I don't,
Yeah, there's that. But also, it's it's all the structure stuff we thought at the beginning because when it became apparent that they were clearly about to find out the same thing, and he's like, but how? And like, there's this whole setup of like, how's he going to get to the truth when they all think he died, old and all of that sort of stuff. In my head, I'm going, well, we've already started seeing it with Aang, so basically, he's going to find a magic bit of paper somewhere, isn't he? And that's, it's a little bit more complex than that, but that's fundamentally what it was. I was sort of like, why are we setting this up as a thing? He's going to need to find it and find it quickly, so it will literally have to be hidden in a place he finds or something.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'll just blast through the last couple of pieces of trivia because we are actually running out of time again. No problem. We will skip listener question this week, but that's fine. I've got plenty back burner, so we'll do that. We'll start.
Okay, I got 5 minutes. We can do a quick one if you've got one to hand.
Well, let's see. So I've still got a few bits of trivia. That's the only reason I was thinking about that. This is the second time that Roku has given Aang a time and place to meet him. Obviously, during the summer solstice at his homeland, in this case, but it mirrors what happened in the episode Water Solstice Part 2. Water Solstice? Winter Solstice Part 2, where I should really be wearing my glasses. That's what I've just learned. Where Aang had the chance to talk to him during the Winter Solstice at the Fire Temple on Crescent Island. Fire Lord Sozin justifies the invasion of other nations as sharing wealth, a concept derived from Japanese imperialism in World War II. The Japanese Empire used an ideological construct called the Great East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere to justify invading China and conquering the South Pacific in the same way the Fire Nation has invaded the Earth Kingdom and Water Tribes. So, just some real world context, I guess, for the choices, which I think I might have talked about in the first part of this, but I can't remember.
Nice.
The episode, I kept this trivia in because this trivia completely baffles me, Chris, and maybe you can make sense of this. This episode is alternately titled The Avatar and the Fire Lord on iTunes and the DVD. That's what it's called.
Is there some sort of like, is and an ampersand or something like that? Or
I can't. No. So I don't understand that the heading of this article with the episode title is The Avatar and the Fire. Oh, with a space between Fire and Lord. Oh, come on, that's not trivia. That's just fuck off.
but yeah, some sort of a technicality thing then.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. If I'd have realised what that was, I'd have skipped it. The creators stated this episode was one of the most complex of the series, in terms of visuals, because it had the most background designs of any single episode, because the location changes quite so often as it jumps through time.
Nice.
So there you go.
Nice. There you go.
That's trivia.
There we go.
So yeah, we've only got a couple minutes left, so I'll use that to wrap up rather than do a question. But it's fine. We've got plenty of questions. We'll get to them next week. Not to worry. So thanks everyone for listening. As always, you can get us on the Patreon, where you can hear episodes 1 week early if you're signed up there. If you're already on the Patreon, obviously you can't hear next week's episode a week early. But if you wanted to hear next week's episode right now and you're not currently a patron, as little as $1 a month, we'll get you access to that. It will also give you the power to ask us a question that we will promptly ignore when we run out of time. No, we will get to them, I promise. I couldn't resist the joke there. You can support us by heading over to like YouTube and subscribing there and liking some of the videos, or heading to the podcast platform of your choice and giving us a little review. There's some nice reviews. I actually had a look at some the other day. There's some really nice ones for this podcast on there. Continue doing that. it's just nice to see. If you go on the Patreon, you can also get access to our Discord, where you can talk to us sort of directly through the messaging. Chris occasionally pops in there now, and it's always a shock. I always forget Chris has access again, because for a long time he didn't. So whenever I see him, I'm like, geez, it's Chris. So that's always good fun. Obviously go support Rapho.
I like to surprise.
What was that, sorry?
I just like to surprise you. I just like to freak you out by doing it.
It works at most times. You can, of course, go support the brilliant Raphodraws, who does great artwork that you can find on Rapho's Instagram page. So it's instagram.com/Raphodraws, RAPHO. I should clarify. You can also go to launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws to get links to, like, you know, I think there's a Redbubble account and a Twitter and a YouTube and all sorts of other great stuff that Rapho has worked on. Supplies us that brilliant piece of art of Appa sort of in the sun that we use as our key art for this podcast, and it's wonderful. And so thank you for agreeing to let us do that. I think I've covered everything. That was quite a quick one. I'm suspicious when it's that quick, because I feel like I missed stuff. Oh yeah, you can get us on Twitter. I'm at Dan Doolan. Chris is at C Billingham with 2 M's. Or if you have some thoughts that a tweet can't contain, you're welcome to email us, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk, for all your complaining about how weird and choppy this episode ended up being.
Yeah, which, you know, fair.
Fair complaint. That's...
Can't argue with that.
Nope. It's a good point. Yeah, that's how you feel listening to it. Imagine how we feel having to do a podcast in 2 parts, 2 hours apart. Wasn't ideal for us either. That's what we played Russian roulette. We lost. That's
what we learned.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And come back to us in a week's time when we sit down to review The Runaway.